So, you've decided to join the United States Coast Guard. Congratulations. You've just volunteered for America's best-kept secret, a military branch that everyone forgets exists until they need rescuing from their own poor life choices. But hey, at least you'll get to explain what you do for a living at every single social gathering for the rest of your life. Welcome to Cape May, New Jersey, the only place where you'll simultaneously freeze your butt off and somehow still manage to sweat profusely. Coast Guard Boot Camp is like Marine Boot Camp's slightly less angry cousin, who still has serious anger management issues, but talks about feelings occasionally. Your company commanders will lovingly remind you that you're the rejects who couldn't make it into the real military. But don't worry, they'll also teach you 47 different ways to tie knots, because apparently, the fate of America depends on your ability to create a bowline under pressure. Nothing says national defense quite like proper rope management. You'll march around Cape May wondering why you didn't just join the Navy like your recruiter suggested. Speaking of recruiters, yours probably forgot to mention that you'd be spending the next few years explaining to everyone that, no, the Coast Guard is not just weekend warriors with boats. After boot camp, you'll head to A School, where you'll learn your rate. That's Coast Guard speak for job, because apparently using normal words would make too much sense. Whether you're learning to be a boatswain's mate, professional boat driver, machinery technician, professional thing fixer, or food service specialist, professional cafeteria hero, you'll quickly discover that your instructors take their jobs very, very seriously. The best part about A School, you'll finally understand what it feels like to be simultaneously overtrained and completely unprepared for real-world situations. It's like learning to drive using only a simulator that was programmed by someone who's never actually seen a car. Arriving at your first unit is magical. You'll walk in with your freshly pressed uniform and enthusiastic attitude, only to be immediately handed a paintbrush and told that painting is what we do here. And boy, do you paint. You'll paint boats that are going straight back into saltwater, buildings that will need repainting next month, and sometimes you'll paint things just because the paint is about to expire. You'll quickly learn that the Coast Guard's motto isn't really Semper Paratus, always ready. It's more like Semper Painting, or Semper Waiting for Parts. Always waiting for parts, because the budget is whatever Congress found in their couch cushions. Let's talk about small boat operations, where you'll experience the unique joy of launching into 8-foot seas in a boat that's basically a floating aluminum can with delusions of grandeur. Your coxswain will cheerfully inform you that if you're not getting wet or not going fast enough, right before you take a wave over the bow that makes you question every life choice that led to this moment. You'll master the art of holding on for dear life while trying to look professional for the inevitable photo that someone's going to take of you, looking like a drowned rat in a life jacket. And remember, when you're throwing up over the side, always aim downwind, unless you want to learn that lesson the hard way. Search and rescue. This is why you joined, right? To save lives and be a hero? Well, you will save lives, but you'll also spend a significant amount of time rescuing people who thought taking their 16-foot bass boat into 15-foot seas was a solid weekend plan. Darwin Award nominees are a surprisingly large part of the Coast Guard's customer base. You'll learn to maintain a straight face while explaining to a recreational boater why their emergency flare gun doesn't actually count as required safety equipment when they've been stranded for 6 hours because they forgot to put gas in their tank. The number of people who don't understand that boats need fuel to run will both amaze and terrify you. Drug interdiction is where things get interesting. You'll spend weeks at sea looking for smugglers, and when you finally catch some, you'll discover that your high-speed chase tops out at about 15 knots because your cutter is older than your parents and has the turning radius of a small island. The best part? After catching millions of dollars worth of contraband, you'll still have to fill out paperwork that makes filing your taxes look like a fun recreational activity. Nothing says mission accomplished quite like spending 3 hours documenting every single detail of your heroic drug busts in triplicate. Vessel inspections are where you'll truly understand the phrase, close enough for government work. You'll board million-dollar yachts owned by people who think having money means they don't need to follow pesky little things like safety regulations or basic maritime law. You'll politely explain to a yacht owner why having expired flares from the Clinton administration might not be the best idea, while they argue that their flares are vintage and therefore more valuable. These are the moments when you'll seriously consider a career change to something less stressful, like bomb disposal or lion taming. Life on a cutter is special. Imagine living in a floating tin can with 30 of your closest friends for weeks at a time, where privacy is a foreign concept and the coffee tastes like it was filtered through a gym sock. The good news is you'll get really good at sleeping through anything: foghorns, general quarters, existential crises. You'll learn that fresh water is more of a suggestion than a guarantee, and that taking a Navy shower, wet down, soap up, rinse off, is actually a luxury cruise experience compared to what you're getting. And don't even think about complaining about the food. The food service specialist is doing their best with whatever expired MREs and canned goods they could find at the last port call. Maintenance in the Coast Guard is an art form. You'll spend 80% of your time fixing things that should have been replaced during the Reagan administration, with parts that were discontinued before you were born. Your ship's motto will inevitably become maximum effort, minimum resources. You'll become an expert at creative problem solving, like using duct tape and zip ties to fix $1 million piece of equipment, because the replacement part costs more than your annual salary and won't be available until sometime in the next fiscal decade. MacGyver would be proud. Let's talk about paperwork, the Coast Guard's true specialty. You'll fill out forms to request permission to fill out other forms. Want to take leave? There's a form for that, and 3 other forms to verify that you filled out the first form correctly. Need supplies? Better hope someone knows where the supply request forms are kept, because they're probably behind another form somewhere. The Coast Guard has managed to turn bureaucracy into an Olympic sport. You'll spend more time documenting what you did than actually doing it, which is particularly fun when you're trying to save someone's life, and your supervisor wants to know if you filled out the pre-rescue checklist properly. Shore duty is where you'll discover that being on the beach doesn't necessarily mean you're at the beach. You might end up at a small boat station in the middle of nowhere, where your primary mission is to stand ready to rescue the occasional lost fisherman and paint everything that isn't moving, and some things that are. You'll become intimately familiar with the phrase, "hurry up and wait," as you rush to respond to an emergency only to find out it was a false alarm, or that someone else already handled it, or that it was actually in a completely different sector altogether. But hey, at least you've got some exercise. The best part about being in the Coast Guard, dealing with the other branches of the military. The Army will ask if you're in the Navy. The Navy will ask if you're real military. The Air Force will sympathetically nod and change the subject. And the Marines, well, they're just happy someone remembers they exist too. You'll spend significant amounts of time explaining that yes, the Coast Guard is actually military, and no, you don't just drive boats around for fun. Although, to be fair, driving boats around is pretty fun, which makes the job description somewhat confusing. Your family will never quite understand what you do for a living. Your mom will tell people you're in the Navy, but like the small one. Your friends will ask if you get to shoot pirates. Your significant other will learn to appreciate the romantic gesture of you being home for dinner more than 3 nights in a row. Dating in the Coast Guard is interesting. Nothing says stable relationship material, quite like explaining that you might disappear for weeks at a time, with little to no warning, and that your idea of exciting shore leave involves finding a grocery store that sells fresh vegetables. The benefits are adequate. You'll get health care, which you'll definitely need for your back after years of climbing around on boats in heavy seas. You'll get the GI Bill, which is perfect because after 20 years of dealing with Coast Guard logic, you'll need some education to understand how the civilian world works. And of course, there's the retirement pay, which after taxes and inflation might be enough to cover your Netflix subscription and half a tank of gas. But hey, at least you'll have some great stories and the knowledge that you served in America's most misunderstood military branch. Years later, when you're out and living civilian life, you'll still automatically look for the life jackets every time you get on any kind of boat. You'll cringe when you see people operating watercraft unsafely, and you'll have to resist the urge to conduct impromptu safety inspections at the marina. You'll miss the camaraderie of working with people who understand that close enough is sometimes actually close enough, and that sometimes the best solution to a problem involves creative thinking and a complete disregard for what the manual says you're supposed to do. So, to all you future Coasties out there, bring your sense of humor, your problem-solving skills, and a healthy appreciation for irony. You're about to join a military branch that saves lives on a daily basis while fighting for recognition and funding, like a middle child competing for attention. Remember, the Coast Guard is like that reliable friend who's always there when you need them, even though everyone forgets to invite them to the party. You'll do important work, save lives, protect the environment, and secure the nation's waterways, all while everyone asks if you're real military. And hey, at least you're not in the Space Force. Disclaimer: no Coasties were harmed in the making of this video. Their pride in being constantly overlooked, however, remains intact.